When it comes to quality sleep, Ashley has you covered with top mattress brands at winning prices and with special financing options available. You can snooze now and pay later. Plus, your mattress purchase helps give the gift of better sleep to children in need and U.S. Special Operations Forces. Visit your local Ashley store or shop online today and make every snooze count. Financing is subject to credit approval. See store or ashley.com for details.
Canva presents True Crime of Design. In the office, Maya spots something unusual in the presentation.
What's this?
It was an off-brand font. Her coworker explains.
I added the font. I thought it was fun.
It was not. Maya solved it with Canva.
Open up Canva, one click, and the font is on brand. Easy.
Stay on brand and solve font crimes at canva.com, the home for every brand.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, is a guy who, like myself, would like to remind you that we did not do this to you. You did this to yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, the Captain.
Yeah, don't make me turn this car around. It's good to be seen, and it's good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
Today we are sipping on Roaring Silence by the innovative brewers over at Jackie O's Microbrewery. This is a delicious, hazy double IPA. You can find it with the threatening psychedelic baboon on the can, but don't be scared. It's just a front. 9% horsepower on this one. Garage grade, 4.5 bottle caps out of 5. And here's a toast and cheers to our beer fridge filling friends. Cheers to Maria in Mount Mellick, Colorado.
And a big We Like Your Jib to Rich and Kristen in the windy city of Chicago.
Next up, all the way on the West Coast, we have Nicole, Elisa, and Libby from Conway, Washington.
And in one of my favorite cities, Mark S. in Philadelphia. And also I want to give a shout out to Ashley WTF. We like your jib, but we did catch you and Jimmy skinny dipping in the parts unknown public pool, and that is not allowed. So pay your fee.
Next, we have a big thank you to Katie Z in Kansas City. We have Samantha D in Lisbon, Iowa. And last but certainly not least, we have Jeremy and Melissa in Old Town Orange, California. Thank you to everyone for filling up this week's beer fridge. If you want to help us out with next week's shows, go to truecrimegarage.com and click on the donate button.
Yeah, everybody say it with me. BWERUN, BWERUN, Beer Run. You want to help out the show? Go to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. And that is enough of the business.
All right, everybody, gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer. Let's talk some true crime. On October 17th, 1983, on a typically quiet Monday morning in a residential community located in Franklin Township, a panic-crazed young woman, clothed only in an ill-fitting blue bathrobe, with her head shaved and handcuffs dangling from her left wrist, was pounding on the door of a home located in Melody Village. Now, to be clear, Captain, this Franklin Township that we are talking about is located along the Cuyahoga River in northeast Ohio. The homeowner opened the door trying to comfort the traumatized woman, asking what was wrong, to which the woman responded, "Call the police, call the police." Between lapses into hysterical sobbing that staggered even hard-bitten police officers, she said to police that she had been abducted at gunpoint around 10:15 p.m. the night before in a Mahoning County filling station while she was working a shift alone. She went on to tell police that she was handcuffed and forced to lay down in a van, and she could not see where her abductor was taking her. After traveling what seemed like a good amount of distance, she felt the van turn into a driveway and heard a garage door open. She could tell that the van had pulled into a garage. Then she heard the door activated once again, this time closing behind the van. She was now trapped. Her abductor ordered her out of the van and through a door. The garage was attached to a home. As terrified as she was, she could not help but to notice how normal the place looked. In fact, the home was extremely neat and tidy. Once inside, the man quickly started in with the name calling and degrading this woman and threatening her with pain and death. She was maliciously instructed to undress. He handcuffed her to a weight bench. During the next approximate 9 hours, he raped and forced her to perform a series of sex acts, during the course of which she was tortured with electrical shock torture. Her head was shaved. A plastic bag was placed over her head and taped around the neck until she passed out. She was punched in her stomach and chest area and beaten with a belt until she bled. Then, after the hours of torment, she was handcuffed and tied face down on a bed. Her captor, after threatening his prisoner, told her he was leaving for work and he would return in about 3 hours. Within minutes, she was able to escape the home, running out the front door into the streets of this quiet neighborhood, eventually arriving on the doorstep of a neighboring house across the street, where someone answered the door and the police were called.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine what's going through her head at that time, and also couldn't imagine what was going through the neighbor's head when this lady comes upon your front door.
Yeah, the call came in around 8:30 a.m., the distress call, and at 11 a.m., this guy, Robert Bob Buell, returned to his 3-bedroom slab house where he was, of course, greeted by police and quickly handcuffed.
They should have just punched him right in the dick and then cuffed him.
Bob Buell was the home owner, and of course this woman is going to be able to identify him as her abductor, attacker, torturer. The list goes on and on. Yeah. This, obviously, Captain, will be an open and shut case. Police had the woman's story. They had blood and marks to prove it. And police were going through the home when Robert Buell returned home at 11 a.m.
Yeah, got him.
They found the weight bench. They found ligatures, some still tied to bedposts. They found the man's gun that the victim said was used in the abduction. They also found weapons and torture devices, one of which is described as an electrical cord or extension cord, basically cut in half, with wires fully exposed on one end and the other end fully intact, so you could still plug it into the wall electrical outlet.
Yeah, this guy's an animal scumbag piece of shit.
As said, this was an open and shut case, but based off of the atrocities carried out by Bob Buell, now the question is, what is this guy capable of? Fully capable of? And right. Has he done anything more that we should be aware of? So when they're tearing through his house, building their case against him for this woman who, thankfully, she got out of there. She managed to escape this house of horrors. They're starting to find things there at his home that they're going, wait a second. This is matching up with some of the physical evidence that we found at the Krista Harmon body disposal site.
Right.
Remember, they had a lot of physical evidence, a lot of items that were found near her body. They found cardboard boxes, a plastic, for lack of a better word, plastic trash bag. They found some clothing items. And this is very interesting to them because now they think they know what this monster's capable of. But what else has this guy done?
Yeah, I mean, the abduction is sophisticated. The ways in which he tortured this victim, you could say it's sophisticated. Doesn't seem like this is his first time.
That's right. Going off of the witness statement, off of the victim statements, it seems like one of two things. Either this guy's done this before because he seems very precise and deliberate with his commands and his demands with his victim. That either this guy's done this before or this was incredibly well rehearsed to the point where everything was going according to his plan. So who is this guy, Robert Anthony Buell? Robert Anthony Buell was born September 10th, 1940 in Norwood, Ohio. He grew up a skinny kid and his parents called him Butchie at home.
Better than douchey.
He was the first of two children born to a family that was described as destined to disintegrate. He attended Williams Avenue Elementary School in Norwood. This was a working class suburb of Cincinnati. His mother was a waitress. She would tell her children that their father was no good, that he drank all the family's money away.
Like the Colonel.
So this soon would lead to the separation of Robert's parents. Custody of the children was awarded to the mother. Shortly after the divorce, the children were put into boarding school. In 1959, Robert graduated from Norwood High School. In October of 61, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where he became an electronics technician. When he left Cincinnati, Robert seemed to have slammed the door on his past, especially on his family. In 1962, he gets married, and in 1965, he and his wife welcome into this world Robert's only child. This is a daughter. That same year, he is honorably discharged from the U.S. Navy. Robert Bob Buell enrolls at the University of Akron taking night classes. In 1968, Bob moves into the quiet residential community of Melody Village in Summit County, Ohio. So this case, when our victim breaks free and escapes his home, this takes place way back in 1983.
Right.
But Robert Buell had moved into this home in 1968. So like you pointed out, you couldn't imagine what's going through her head and all the horrible things she's been put through. But the neighbors as well, because this is a guy that was known in the community.
Yeah. I mean, anybody that
lived there for 15 years.
Right. He's a fixture in that community.
Bob then works as a loan officer for Centran Bank in Akron, Ohio. Now, in 1975, Bob Buell takes a job working as a loan and grant specialist. This is a job change for him, but a loan and grant specialist in the Akron Planning Department's rehabilitation program. So he takes this job in 1975, Captain, and he's still working there in 83 when this woman manages to escape from his home. That's the job he was going off to, and it looks like he was going to return to his prisoner on his lunch break, I'm guessing,
right,
where he's then greeted by police.
Yeah, but so I'm guessing at this point he's not married.
Yeah, they separated.
And there's no child living at that location.
Well, they separated, and it seems to be, there was probably some other things going on, but in August of 1978,
you think?
Buell was arrested in Uniontown for public indecency. Now, for this, he simply pays a small fine, and less than 2 years later, record of this conviction is expunged. In September of 80, Bob and his wife of 18 years, according to what I could find, say that they mutually decided to call it quits, and that's when they got their divorce. In August of 81, we're going to go through some things that Bob might be suspected of, things that were going on in the area.
Yeah.
So in August of 81, a stranger fondles a 13-year-old Doylestown girl in the basement of her home. And I have very little details about this alleged crime here, but She would later identify this quote-unquote stranger as Bob Buell. She identifies him, picks him out of a photograph. I'm uncertain what this stranger was doing at the home. I don't know if there was
What Bob was doing.
a large party going on, and it happened to be someone she didn't know. It's all a little bit weird without having the details here in this case. But what is interesting is after this poor girl was fondled in the basement, someone starts placing anonymous phone calls to the home of the 13-year-old victim.
Right.
It's a male caller that's asking for the little girl by name.
Yeah, that's sicko.
Now, it's just 2 months later when Tina Harmon disappeared and was killed.
Mm-hmm.
In late March of the following year, in 1982, an Akron woman is abducted at knife point from a local mall. She is robbed and sexually assaulted by the attacker. She reports the attack to police, but she's unable to identify the assailant. Less than 4 months later, in mid-July, Krista Harrison, who we talked about last week, is abducted and killed. Then September 30th, 1982, a 26-year-old Barberton woman is abducted at gunpoint outside of a local tavern. The attacker did little to hide his identity. He forced her to walk with him into a nearby field. This is, off into the distance, into the darkness, where she was beaten and sexually assaulted. Now, just like our Akron victim, she reports the attack to the local authorities, and although the assailant did nothing to hide his face, she was only able to provide a description of the unknown man. That vague description, as vague as it is, will be similar but not spot on to a suspect composite sketch that we saw stemming from the Krista Harrison murder investigation.
Yeah, I mean, if you put Robert up to these sketches, yes, they look similar, but anybody with like average length hair with a mustache, white and skinny, is going to fit that sketch.
Yeah, so my thoughts on the sketch here, and this is where my mind jumped to immediately. When Bob is picked up for abducting this woman, she escapes from his home. When police show up there, now they know what this guy is up to. I mean, these are horrible, horrible crimes.
Yeah, piece of shit.
Okay, this is beyond just abduction and rape. This is a whole nother horrible level here.
Right.
And police, we said that they found some items that seemed to be matching up as far as physical evidence goes to the Krista Harrison murder case. But I think, and you're right, I mean, these composite sketches they are vague because it's just a very brief encounter that the witness had with Krista Harrison's abductor.
Right.
But I mean, it looks to me like somebody sat down looking at Robert Buell and drew a picture of him. That's how close I think the composite sketches are to him. Now, it helps him to go undetected that he lives a distance away from where these other crimes went down.
Right.
Now, just before the spring season of the following year, so now we are at the 1st of March, 1983.
Well, and hold on there for a second, too, because I also think his occupation plays into this a little bit. And we kind of talked about this in the previous case of the disheveled guys, the farm hands that get accused of a crime. And you go, well, they kind of fit that profile. If he's a loan officer, he is showing up every day to work, probably in a suit and tie. So that, I think, along with his house and the neighborhood in which he lives, I just got a notification that you sent me a picture. Mm-hmm. His occupation, the place where he lives, the neighborhood, and then the condition of the house in which he kept it, really is all by design to throw people off any kind of scent that this guy is an animal.
Mm-hmm. Well, on the 1st of March in 1983, a male driver of a dark-colored van approached two young girls ages 13 and 12 in Lodi, Ohio. Some people say Lodi, some people say Lodi. He pulls a gun and threatens both of them and attempts to abduct them right then and there. The girls immediately scream at the sight of the gun and they flee the attacker. So this guy was unable to control the situation, unable to control his targets, and with the risk of being spotted by somebody else, the would-be abductor returns to his van and speeds away into the night.
Now, we've talked about this van before. We believe it's like a dark red or a maroon color, tinted windows, and has the circle windows in the back.
Well, we have a few different descriptions based off of witness statements that they believe either it's often referred to as a dark colored van.
Right.
Because what we have here is different witnesses throw a different color name. You know, one witness might say purple, one might say brown, one might say a dark maroon color.
Right.
But what is agreed upon is that it was a dark, full-size van that was in question for the Krista Harrison case.
Well, not to step on your toes, but does Robert have a van matching this description?
He does, and that's where things get a little wonky. That's going to be ultimately his downfall, is this van.
It's kryptonite.
This van is very much involved in a lot of these cases, be it either he uses it to abduct someone or, as we're later going to suspect, maybe he's using it to transport a body at some point as well. Now, what's weird, though, is with the Krista Harrison case, we have a witness who says that they thought they spotted a man fleeing the area of the dump site that morning. And he described a man, but the man was driving a car, not a van. Where we're at in the timeline, Captain, we're at the early part of 1983. Before we move on too far, I do want to point out this whole time, since August of 1981, remember the anonymous phone calls? These continued periodically off and on to the home of that 13-year-old Doylestown victim.
Yeah, calls from the creepo.
Now, on the 8th of March, 1983, one of the phone calls is then traced to the Melody Village residence of Bob Buell.
Got him.
On May 10th, 1983, in a back alley in the tiny town of Jeromesville, Ohio, this is located in the sticks of Ashland County, a man approached a little girl. The encounter starts with a question followed by, everyday pleasantries, but ends with him attempting to pull her into his vehicle. Thankfully, the girl gets away, and after telling her parents, this incident is reported to the authorities, where the child is able to offer a brief description of the vehicle. The vehicle is described as a two-door subcompact car, which turned out to be a Ford Pinto. Now, the very astute and aware child was able to provide authorities with a license plate number for the guy that tried to abduct her. Mm-hmm. Authorities find that the vehicle in question is registered to Bob Buell's ex-wife. So in the coming weeks, detectives will go to the home, Buell's ex-wife's home, to ask about the Ford Pinto. This is where this guy is kind of getting lucky, right? I mean, he's smart. He's using resources to evade capture and detection, really. But the police, what do they have to go on? They have a license plate. Well, they're going to go and talk to his ex-wife who does not live with him. So that doesn't immediately put Bob Buell on the radar. It is a little weird that one of the anonymous phone calls is traced back to his home. So he should be on someone's radar by this point.
Right.
But the other tricky thing where he got lucky as well is, remember we talked about the plastic bag and the cardboard box that was found near Krista Harrison's body. They were able to trace that back to Sears, to the department store. And it was used to sell black car seats, vehicle seats. Remember, they traced that to about 25-ish people that lived in northeastern Ohio. Police would do a check on these individuals. However, none of them owned a vehicle at the time of Krista Harrison's abduction that matched the vehicle that was described by the witnesses. So Bob has this full-size van, but it's distinctly different from the one that is believed to have been spotted by these witnesses. So another case where this guy may have just got lucky. Somebody misremembered something or didn't remember something correctly when they gave the information to the police.
Well, and I wonder, being a loan officer, maybe he does auto loans, and maybe he has some contacts with some local dealers. Maybe he's using somebody else's vehicle or dealers' vehicles.
Later that same month, Captain, a 29-year-old woman is abducted at gunpoint in East Liverpool, Ohio. She is held prisoner and tormented for what she says is 3 days in a small house that she believes is owned by her abductor. On June 25th, 1983, Deborah K. Smith vanishes from a downtown street carnival in Massillon, Ohio. And sadly, her lifeless body will be found a little more than a month afterward. On Sunday, October 16th, 1983, a 28-year-old woman is abducted at a Damascus, Ohio gasoline service station. She is the one that was taken to a location that she believes could be the home of her abductor. She's the one that escaped the following morning when her attacker leaves the home. Now, later that day, Bob Buell returns to his home where he's greeted by local police. The man, of course, is arrested, identified as Robert Anthony Buell, the owner of the home, and over the course of the coming months, Bob Buell would admit to having committed the May 83 abduction of the East Liverpool, Ohio woman, and the October 83 abduction of the Damascus woman. So he's confronted with this stuff, he's arrested for it, and through their investigation, they're going to get him to admit to abducting, raping, and torturing these two women. But one thing that's incredibly different from some of these other cases that they're starting to wonder, could he be connected to? The one woman escaped. The other woman was eventually let go by the captor.
Right.
So on the last day of January 1984, Bob Buell at this time is 43 years old. He's sentenced to 121 to 320 years in prison after pleading no contest to 16 felonies in connection with the two admitted abductions. He would be eligible for parole after serving at least 58 years. So he would have to live to be 101 years old to have his next possible day of freedom. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you look forward to the holidays? Maybe you struggle with seasonal blues. This time of year can be a lot, and it's natural to feel some sadness or even anxiety about it. But adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot, something to look forward to make you feel grounded, and to give you the tools to manage everything going on. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/garage today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/garage.
Rosetta Stone is the language learning program with a lasting impact. I've been using their app to learn French, and it's not just about memorizing words, but actually having real conversations. And it's not just French. They offer 25 languages. Right now, Rosetta Stone has an awesome holiday deal, 50% off their lifetime membership. Every language, unlimited access forever. For anyone keen on diving deep into a new language, check out rosettastone.com. It's a game changer.
you can start your day off right. When you find a professional on Angie to get your plumbing right first. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Visit Angie.com. You can do this when you Angie that.
All right, cheers, mates. Make sure you go to iTunes, give us a 5-star review, and cheers to you, Colonel.
Cheers to you, Captain. Starting on the day of Bob Buell's arrest in October of 83, local authorities, including the FBI and detectives from several counties, immediately began collecting evidence to build a case against Bob Buell for the abduction that we just talked about. Now, what they're finding, they're starting to link this to Krista Harrison's case with physical evidence.
Right.
And they're starting to build a case against Bob Buell for the abduction and murder of Krista Harrison.
But if you're law enforcement, you have to be optimistic because, yes, you caught him red-handed, basically, with the one abduction. The other one, you didn't catch him red-handed, but he confessed to it. So you have to be optimistic that if you have more evidence and you can lean on him more, that he might confess to other crimes.
Well, and with these serial offenders, with these serial killers and rapists, usually what we end up talking about, or the way that we are clued into who the offender is that there's a victim that manages to get away. And we've seen that time and time again. And in this case, she gets away, thankfully. They start finding evidence inside his home that links him to the physical evidence found at the body dump site of Krista Harrison. Now we got all these different communities and different law enforcement agencies working together, focusing in on Bob Buell, and they start noticing that some of the physical evidence at Krista Harrison's dump site is similar to physical evidence that they found on Tina Harmon.
Right.
And at the time, this is just weird and bizarre, but from 1980 to about 1983, there were roughly about a dozen abduction and murders of child female victims in the state of Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
We know that Bob Buell was active for some of that time. He pled no contest to 2 abductions, rapes, and tortures of these grown women. And so now he's kind of linked through the media, through some of the investigators, and at least in the eyes of the public, he might be responsible. Could he be responsible for all of these?
Well, yeah, because one, these are happening the northeast part of Ohio. We know he's from Cincinnati, which would be the southwest part. So even if he doesn't have a bunch of contacts with his family, he still might have friends in that area. Well, that gets him traveling through the whole state. We know he's a loan officer, so he's not traveling a bunch for his job. With those connections, he'd be traveling through the whole state of Ohio.
Eventually, investigators would decide that they have enough evidence against Bob Buell to charge him for the murder and abduction of Krista Harrison. And his trial was scheduled to start March 19th, 1984, and the trial would take place in the city of Cleveland. It would take some time, Captain, but he is found to be guilty of Krista Leah Harrison's murder. And for this, he is sentenced to die by the state of Ohio.
Time to die, Bob.
You're talking about a guy who's already facing a minimum of 58 years all the way up to 300 years in prison for previous crimes. And now, I mean, what are you left to do with this guy? He's already serving basically life in prison. And now you've figured out, oh, he also abducted and killed a child. So, of course, they sentence him to die. Bob Buell would maintain that he was innocent from the time that they arrested him until the time that they eventually put him to death.
Innocent of
he admits
the child
to
murder.
Yeah, he admits to abducting and traumatizing adult women, but says that he had nothing to do with Krista Harrison's case. He had nothing to do with any of the child cases, is what he claims. And I mean, he goes on to say, look, I claims that he's innocent. He says there's no eyewitnesses, and we'll come back to that, or DNA evidence connecting him to the crime. Okay, you have to keep in mind this is the early 80s.
Right.
I don't know that we would expect to see conclusive DNA evidence connecting him to the crime at the time. The no eyewitnesses. This is an interesting statement, and this is actually a true statement. Even though the composite sketch looks like Robert Buell, these are the witnesses that saw the described man at the park abduct Krista Harrison. What we learn is he's able to say this definitively to the public and in interviews and not be lying to us, because apparently Roy, remember he said goodbye Roy or see you later Roy or something to that effect when he abducted Krista Harrison.
Right.
Roy couldn't pick Bob Buell out of a photo lineup.
Well, that's odd.
So this is a weird situation. It's the reverse of the Tina Harmon wrongful convictions, right? The Tina Harmon wrongful convictions, we had fake eyewitnesses, so-called eyewitnesses that said that they somebody admitted the crime to them, the murder to them, and no physical evidence, and they got a conviction, which were eventually overturned. But here in this case, Captain, we have a lot of physical evidence connecting Bob Buell to the murder of Krista Harrison, but we can't get an eyewitness, even though there were witnesses to the actual abduction.
Yeah, but I think, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here, we have a lot of times that these killers or these serial killers that we believe are responsible for, I mean, the age of the victims that he is admitting to kidnapping and torturing, they're a little bit older of victims. And so I can confess to those, but I can't confess to this crime against a child, because we know that there is prison justice most of the time for those individuals.
Well, not only that, prison justice or not, they're sentencing him to die.
Right.
His sentence is a death sentence.
Right. That's what I'm saying. There's all these more motivating reasons to lie about this. But then it makes you wonder, and just go with me on this for a little bit. It makes you wonder if the science or the studying of these individuals correct. Most of them have some kind of type of victim that they're looking for. And we have him at least pinpointed on 2 victims, and they're very similar. Is it possible that he was connected to any other individual that he would help? I'll help abduct a kid, and I'll give the kid to you if you help abduct, a teenager and give him to me. If that makes any sense.
An adult?
Yeah. But it would be, it would make sense on why they can't pick him out of a lineup, because whoever abducted her might have not been her killer.
Right.
I know that's a long shot.
Possibly. I mean, it's also a good amount of time has gone by from the very brief, quick abduction that a juvenile witness, their statements, and when Bob Buell is actually arrested. What we do have too, though, Captain, is we have an adult surviving victims, two, that we are 100% aware of. And neither of them describe anything other than Bob Buell is the man who abducted and tortured me.
I know it was the early 80s, but did Bob have a computer in his house?
I do not know. I couldn't find anything in the arrest record or the evidence collection that would tell me that he had a computer or not.
Makes me wonder if he was a part of some kind of pedophilia ring or some kind of online network where he'd be exchanging illegal pornography or child porn. And then one piece of shit leads you to multiple pieces of shit.
Well, and I get what people were saying, because at the time people were like, this man's saying that he's innocent. Yes, he's a horrible, horrible person, no matter what, because of the 2 crimes we know he did commit. But he's saying he's innocent of this child murder. I get what people were thinking at the time, that, okay, that's not his victimology. But
Right.
We've been doing this for a little bit of time. Ted Bundy had both adult and child female victims. Richard Ramirez had both adult and child victims. BTK, adult and child victims. Joseph Condro, adult and child victims. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Joseph Condro told John Douglas in an interview that he decided, he absolutely had to be a pedophile. No doubt about it, but he's not willing to admit that to John Douglas in the interviews. He simply tells Douglas it was easier to abduct female children than it was to abduct female adults.
Well, and with Richard Ramirez, I mean, he had victims, I think, as young as 6 all the way into their 80s. So that's a huge range.
And sometimes with these guys, I mean, he's a sexual sadist, Robert Buell is. And it may simply have been he was out trolling for a victim and he happened to come across a 12-year-old girl before he came across a 25-year-old woman to abduct. He saw an opportunity and he took it. He claims he was innocent, but the prosecutors argued that the evidence against him in Krista Harrison's case was overwhelming. I found it to be very substantial, the case they were able to build against him. They convicted him on fiber evidence. This was fibers that were found in multiple locations at the body dump site, on some of the clothing as well of Krista Harrison. And they're able to find these same fibers in his vehicle and in his home. They were able to match paint. There was different colors of paint that were found on some of the clothing items that were discarded near the victim as well. And they were able to match paint on those clothing items to paint found inside of his home.
Right. So what you're saying is no matter what this idiot said, he's guilty of this crime. But it's also oddly, it's almost like Richard Ramirez in reverse, in the sense of Richard had 16 charges against him, sexually assaulting minors or raping minors, and he let all the children victims go, as far as we know. But the other victims he killed, and then it's almost in reverse. We don't know that he was going to kill the second adult that he captured. He let the first one go. If he would have let the second one go, it's kind of a weird.
Yeah, but there's the devil's in the details, my friend. What was one of the details that the surviving victim said? He placed a bag over my head, taped it to my neck, and left it there until I passed out.
Right.
So the two child victims, Tina Harmon and Krista Harrison, both were described in their autopsies as having been choked. They died due to strangulation.
Right.
Probably due to some choking with a rope type item and with hands. Now, a lot of times, and this, I apologize, there's no way to deliver this other than how I'm about to do it. A lot of times these guys, they're sexual sadists. They enjoy, just like we said in the trailer last week, they enjoy inflicting the pain and seeing the pain in the eyes and on the face of their victim.
Right.
And if choking and strangulation is their thing, a lot of times they will choke and strangle till the person will pass out, revive them, and do it again and do it again and do it again.
Yeah.
What I'm pointing out here, where people say, oh, he let go these women that he tortured, well, that may be. Who knows? I 100% believe, and we'll get into why we should all agree, that Buell killed Krista Harrison and Tina Harmon. Who knows? Maybe his intention was to drive them out in the middle of nowhere and let them go. But they're children. You cannot inflict the same amount of pain and other torture,
right,
to that of a child that you could a woman, a full-grown person. Who knows? Maybe he intended to let them go and they died during the torture process.
Yeah, I think lethal injection, too easy. Even electric chair, too easy. I think what they do, they put him on it in a chair, they make him spread eagle, and then they take hold on. I'm
trying to keep this sophisticated a little bit, but
this is sophisticated. This is use that extension cord he had, and you plug it in, and then you take the other end and you just jab him right in the balls.
Well,
hot meat.
The thing is,
till death.
If torture was his thing, and it definitely sounds like it was, you can take a little bit of joy in this next statement. Some people find this to be psychological torture. He was strapped up and ready to go back in 1996. They were going to put him to death. I mean, he was seconds away from being put to death, and they called it off.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, he would be sentenced to death and executed on September of 2002. Now, he was only ever convicted of killing Krista Harrison. He was suspected of multiple child abduction and murders. Police always said in those counties, we have some evidence that we believe links Robert Buell to these cases, and their stance always was case closed, right? This guy's been sentenced to death. You can't kill a man twice, and he's been executed.
That always sucks, though, for the victim's family of the other cases, because you want to know for certain.
Correct. And the thing is, what if, it might be a very small percentage chance, but what if they're wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So what ends up happening in Tina Harmon's case is the family, they come forward and they're like, well, we want to know for sure. We understand that the police are saying Robert Buell did this. And they're like, yeah, we believe you, but we want to know for sure.
Well, and the other thing is, if it's not the right guy, then you have an equal animal on the street preying on these victims.
Well, the interesting thing with the Tina Harmon case was they had Bob Buell's DNA on file, the state of Ohio.
Yeah.
And they had DNA evidence in Tina Harmon's case. And so the family was petitioning, saying, hey, test this DNA. Let's make sure that it was Robert Buell. And the county was like, well, we would, but it's awfully expensive. So guess who came after the county? Old friend of the show, James Renner.
Jimmy Renner.
He comes after the county and he says, well, how much does it cost? Maybe we can figure out a way to raise the money and we'll get somebody else to pay for it.
Right.
If the county can't afford it. The county comes back and this is egg on the face, right? Where they go, yeah, it's like $400, $500 to conduct these tests.
Oh, yeah. You offer that to the family.
That's not
you
much
sons
money
of bitches. Offer it to the family. Hey, it's $500. We don't want to use taxpayer money, even though we should, even though you probably paid more taxes last quarter than what we need to run these tests. Offer it to the family, you pieces of shit. You know what I mean?
So what ends up happening, Captain, is
hold on. A little girl died. Their little girl died, and you're going to put a price tag on that? You pile of shit. Okay, sorry.
Well, 8 years after the state of Ohio executed Robert Buell, they did conduct the DNA testing and confirmed 100% that they found his DNA on our victim, Tina Harmon. So he has been conclusively linked to 2 of the 3 murders that we discussed here today, the 3 child murders.
Got him.
The other thing, too, is a lot of those crimes that we talked about where the stranger abduction, these crimes that were reported, but they didn't have anybody to link them to. After Bob Buell was arrested, these victims started coming forward saying that was the guy that tried to abduct me.
Right.
So he's been linked to all of those. Now, per Wikipedia, Bob Buell, it was listed on his page on Wikipedia up until December of last year that he was most likely responsible for the North Columbus murder of 8-year-old Kelly Ann Prosser. However, we find out that that was not true because in June of last year, Columbus Deputy Police Chief Greg Bodker held a press conference 38 years after Kelly's murder and thousands of man-hours expended. There was a break in the case. Columbus cold case detectives received permission to utilize two new investigative tools to solve Kelly's case. One was something we referenced earlier called The Fifth Floor, which is a podcast that is put out from time to time from Columbus PD. They discussed her cold case on their show, The Fifth Floor. The other technology was a process that we've discussed multiple times on this show and have already here today. It was the technology being used around the country to locate violent offenders who are not trackable using traditional detective work. We're talking about genetic genealogy investigations.
Right.
So in early 2020, the cold case unit hired Advanced DNA to test samples taken from Kelly's body. Advanced DNA was able to match the DNA in the sample to a third cousin of a family which came primarily from West Virginia and was Caucasian. The family was associated with two surnames, and one of these surnames was Jarrell. The genetic evidence pointed to a Harold Warren Jarrell as that of being the killer of Kelly Ann Prosser. So after 38 years, Captain, the Columbus PD were finally able to close Kelly's case, and they identified Harold Warren Jarrell as her killer. Now, the cold case detective said, quote, "He was not anywhere near the top of our list. In fact, he had never been mentioned in the original case file."
Well, we see that from time to time.
It's rare, but we do see it, and this was a case of it's a stranger child abduction, which is so rare. And his name,
also the reason why it's so hard to solve.
His name didn't appear in the case file because he had nothing. He was nowhere near the social circles of this little girl or her family. He must have just spotted her alone and either tricked her to getting into his car or he abducted her.
Yeah, and they weren't able to make a arrest on Harold, but he died in Nevada in 1996, and he was 67.
Yes.
Robert Buell seems like a perfect, the age of victims, the manner in which he does it, and seems brazen as far as being able to abduct people in broad daylight. Obviously, the picture doesn't match up, and obviously he would have been in jail at the time of Amy Mihaljevich's abduction. But that's why I question, yes, I know it's early 80s, but sometimes these sick individuals have communications with each other, whether it's online or through mail. And I really just think maybe it's a long shot of a lead, but he could have been connected to somebody because it's very similar to the crimes that he committed.
Well, that's one thing that we discussed at length with James Renner in regards to this case. We call him a nephew, but he's not technically a nephew of Robert Buell, who has been suspected in some other crimes. Some people think that maybe the nephew is responsible for Amy Mihaljevich's murder. Personally, I feel like the nephew just happens to be Robert Buell's nephew.
Right.
And that they didn't really do anything in cahoots together. I think that Robert Buell is guilty of the crimes we suspect him of. And like I said, up until December,
but
this
Kellyanne
Prosser case,
right? Probably more.
Yeah, probably some more. But this Kellyanne Prosser case was solved in the middle of last year, and his Wikipedia page still had him as the prime suspect in her case 6 months after it was solved.
Right.
So I'm glad to see that has been updated and changed, and it's just really a unique look at this monster that was living in Northeast Ohio. And because of what we know, the crimes we know he committed, he's been suspected in so many other crimes that were left unsolved at the time. After his execution date, we have one cold case that's solved 8 years after he's executed. And then Kellyanne Prosser's case, it solved 38 years after her murder, and it turned out to be somebody completely different.
Yeah, and I know I don't say this enough, and I don't want to get too sappy on you, Colonel, but the amount of knowledge that you're putting out in these episodes, especially like a 4-parter, it's just heads and tails above so many other hosts. And look, other true crime hosts are great storytellers, but is it too early to start calling you the GOAT? The GOAT of true crime? I mean, this is a lot of knowledge that you're passing on. And you and Renner, and I know not everybody's a fan of the King of Cleveland.
Hey, not everybody's a fan of the Colonel either.
That's true. But I'm seeing these other shows get awards. I just don't think you're getting the credit. And I'm going to say it, and maybe some people are going to get mad. Guess what? Be mad. He might be the GOAT. Maybe Nick's the GOAT. Maybe the Colonel, maybe the Crispy Colonel is the Crispy GOAT. But on a serious note, let's get serious. The thing that I'm really proud of you and Renner doing is the Porch Light Project. Anybody can donate. Look, we just got done explaining that they didn't want to spend $500 to give answers to the victim's family.
To Tina Harmon's family, yeah.
The Porch Light Project is taking on cases and helping, but it's not cheap, and they need your help. So if you could take, $5, $10, whatever, instead of going to Starbucks tomorrow, donate to the Porch Light Project, and you can do so at porchlightonline.org. Hit the support us button, and you can donate there.
Well, and I really like the work that Porch Light is doing. I'm very proud of the work that we've done there. I'm going to pat myself on the back for something else, though, right here, Captain.
Yeah. As long as you don't stroke yourself.
I like getting things right. I like things being correct. And that's why we present the information we have in a certain way here in the garage, because we want the record to be correct. I don't know that I was the person that is singly responsible for this, but I can say this. I emailed Wikipedia over and over and over last year until they removed that sentence from Robert Buell's page, saying that he was the prime suspect in Kelly Ann Prosser's murder. Because we knew starting in June of last year that he was not responsible for that murder. In fact, in a June 2020 news conference announcing that they solved Kelly's case, Kelly's family thanked law enforcement for their dedication to their case over nearly 4 decades via a letter that was read aloud. And a portion of it was this. Quote, "When Kelly Ann left for school the morning of September 20, 1982, we did not expect our time with her would abruptly end or that our future would change in every way imaginable. One moment we had this dazzling, mischievous, 8-year-old little girl. Then suddenly all we had left were memories, photographs that will never age, a calendar marking a dreadful new holiday, a grave, and pieces of Kelly's life stored in a box. So they now have their answers, but sadly, that's all they have."
I want to thank everybody so much for joining us here in the garage. Cheers to all you true crime addicts. Colonel, do we have any recommended reading?
This is exciting. This fantastic book came out just yesterday. We were able to get an advance copy so we could review, and we are very happy to recommend to you The Low Country Murder of Gwendolyn Elaine Fogel, A Cold Case Solved. This is by Special Agent Lieutenant Rita Schuler, who worked on the case shortly after she joined the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, and she couldn't let this case go, not even after her retirement in 2001. You know I love these old cold cases, Captain. This is about the 1978 murder of Gwendolyn Fogel. It was the Walterboro Police Department's top cold case for 37 years. Check out The Low Country Murder of Gwendolyn Elaine Fogel, available now on Kindle and paperback. And if you are busy, don't worry about writing that title down now. We have that listed for you, along with a bunch of other great true crime books on our recommended page at truecrimegarage.com.
And until next week, be good, be kind, and don't litter.
Whether you're making the same breakfast that you have every day or baking a cake for an extra special day, eggs are a staple in our diets. Eggland's best eggs are nutritionally superior to ordinary eggs, containing 6 times more vitamin D and double the omega-3s. Not only are they better for you, but Eggland's best eggs taste better too. There's a reason that they're America's #1 eggs. Visit egglandsbest.com for additional information and delicious recipes.